Welcome to Mountains Made Low, where we help you encounter the love of God and live well in the modern world. I'm Christine Reagan.
And I'm Dennis Mueller.
So I can't think of a better topic to drop on Thanksgiving Day than an episode on the dark night of the soul. When I did the math on this, I thought, this is interesting how it's falling. But I was also thinking that maybe you're driving home from your Thanksgiving dinner right now and you're listening to it. And the only way to describe that dinner is a dark night of the soul. So this might be entirely appropriate for what it is that you feel like you just sat through, or maybe for what you're preparing to go to tonight if it's Thanksgiving morning. So
I think we could have done an episode on purgatory. I think that would have been an appropriate one too sometimes when it comes to Thanksgiving, what we have to endure.
We've been bouncing this topic around for a long time, and we're finally doing it. And I just feel like there are times in the spiritual life where we have to balance things out. And what I mean by that is I work heavily with OCIA, RCIA, and a lot of the material that is put out for people who are kind of like in an inquiry stage of finding out about Catholicism, or they're beginning to seek the sacraments of the church, a lot of the content that is put out in terms of catechesis and evangelization, it's always talking about, and this is very true, I'm not disagreeing with it, how much God wants joy for your life, how happy you're going to be. You're going to be the best version of yourself. There should be a drinking game for Chris Stefanik for how much he uses the word awesome, right? Everything in the Christian life is awesome. And I know he doesn't necessarily mean that, but it can very much come off like that.
And then when it doesn't, then you're sitting back thinking, what am I doing wrong?
Or did everybody lie to me? And that's the thing.
Does God not love me? Am I the exception to the rule?
And I just feel like we need to have a both-and approach to theology and to an authentic life of faith that's lived out, and what you're going to experience as you do that.
Well, we've talked about that. I think sometimes too, when you think about the joy in suffering, the joy in suffering comes from knowing that God loves me and is with me and is accompanying me. I know you're joking about, like, again, purgatory, dark night of the soul, Thanksgiving. Oh, there is some truth to it. But I think that this is a really good time of the year to kind of bring this up, because so many people, as soon as Thanksgiving holidays roll around and you start moving into Christmas and all of the other holiday events that are associated with this time of the year, can be a very depressing time period in their lives.
And you're almost just waiting for January to hit. You're like, when is this going to be over?
When is it going to be over?
Do you get depressed around the holidays? Are you one of those do you struggle over the holiday times?
I don't. But I mean, I know people who do.
I do too.
And it's rough to see people going through that. Hopefully this episode will give you a little bit of stuff to take away. Maybe give you something to hold on to in terms of hope.
Yeah, I think hope is the operative word. Everything that we're going to talk about, it's all leading us to a experience of unity with God and hope. So bear with us as we go through this.
So where does this idea come from, this dark night of the soul?
The dark night of the soul comes from St. John of the Cross, who was a 16th century Spanish Carmelite mystic, doctor of the church. He wrote two major works on what has been coined the dark night of the soul. So you're going to find this concept in his writing of The Dark Knight, which is not the Batman movie. I feel like we need to say that. And The Ascent of Mount Carmel. He initially wrote this poem, and then later on, it's only like a 7-stanza poem. Yeah. And then later on, he wrote a great treatise.
Yeah.
If you can listen to the poem, I think it would be very beneficial. And so what this all means is that when he coined this term, the dark night of the soul, he's specifically talking about the unique experience of when in the spiritual life, God removes certain consolations. And that would be like feelings of sweetness in prayer, clarity, comfort. And he does this in order to purify the soul and lead it to a deeper union with him.
And he's not alone in that. Like Ignatius of Loyola with consolation and desolation. A lot of the spiritual
Bonaventure was
they
big
all
on this.
Talk about this. There is a pattern to this. This is a pattern. It's a natural pattern. I think we need to understand that this is a natural pattern in our own spiritual lives. There's going to be times where there's just consolation and things are really, really good. We're content. Maybe we're even growing. And then there's going to be these periods of dark desolation.
I might challenge that a little bit. I don't know that the dark night of the soul is just a darker period. I think this is something very distinct that happens in the spiritual life.
Well, for John of the Cross, yes.
Okay.
But what I'm saying, like all the spiritual writers, they all acknowledge this ebb and flow in our spiritual development.
Okay. Yeah. and John includes this in his writing, the purpose of this is not for us to suffer, even if that might be what we experience as we're going through it. It's God intentionally doing something in our life to assist us in our continual conversion to him. He's doing something in our lives. And he's not arbitrarily having us suffer, even if we're suffering in the midst of it.
Yeah. He's always at work.
Yes.
Right? Always at work. Yeah.
And so as we're trying to understand this trial, this dark night that can arise in our faith, we have to remember who God is. He's good. He only gives us good things. And this dark night is another manifestation of his goodness. But the thing about God is that his methods are not our methods and his ways are not our ways. And we can be confused by them. And I think that people are often confused and they don't even want to go into the theology of the dark night of the soul.
Sure.
Because it challenges in their mind who God is. Because maybe they've just been told how awesome God is. And it's that it has that level of excitement and sweetness and sentimentality. So, well, who is God when all of that is removed? Is he still good? Is he still who he says he is?
Right.
So
I think you hit on something too there, because we have to keep in mind that this is a way in which God is purifying us, constantly refining our love and making our love for him and for others more pure, because we need to be purified. We all struggle to love.
We are not as good as we think we are. Can I say that?
Yeah, I
Okay.
think you're hit on the. Yeah, I mean, I'll be the first to admit it. I'm not as good as I think I am. My wife will tell you that. My kids will tell you that. You'll tell me
I'll
that.
tell you that.
So we do. We struggle with love. We struggle to love, and I also think sometimes we can struggle with being loved. Because maybe we don't think that we're worthy of love. And so we keep love at arm's length. And if we do that in our personal relationships, well, you can guarantee that we're doing that with God too. God's over there. So this is a real opportunity for us to take a look at ourselves, because sometimes what happens is we end up loving the wrong things in this life, or we love the right things wrongly.
That's a great thing to meditate on. What do I love? How do I love things? Are they worth loving?
Right. Well, when you take a look at the 7 deadly sins, I think sometimes when you take a look at like pride, envy, those 3 heavy ones, what we're doing is there's a disorder. There's a disordered love. It's a love of the self. And when you get into gluttony and lust and
Thanksgiving Day, folks, gluttony and lust. I don't know what's going on.
but when you get into those things, there's a disordered love for things that we have. We do excess. So we have a tendency to love things in a disordered way. And so in order to bring about the right ordering of love, someone may experience a dark night. And this can be a real mystical path to God. Because I think St. John was very clear that going through a dark night is supposed to lead and transform us. It leads us to transformation. And it's not God's abandonment of us, although I think sometimes it can feel that way. Like God is still there. It's God just kind of maybe withholds his presence just enough to help us to begin to look for him. Like he's there. He's very much there, but we're not keying into that. He's withholding something from us in order to have us tune back in, I think. At least that's how I experience
Yeah, we're going to
it in my
unpack
own
it for
life.
sure.
Yeah. So it's not God's abandoning us, although we can feel that way. And there's a quote from the Dark Night of the Soul. It says, "O guiding night, O night more lovely than the dawn, O night that has united the lover with his beloved."
Yeah, so I mean, like there's something about the night that brings lovers together, and that's very much the tone of the poem. That it's like 2 lovers going back and forth, and I don't think people think about that. They don't realize that is the motivation for everything he says about the dark night of the soul. It's a love relationship. It's almost spousal. If you get to the end of the poem, there's a lot of spousal language. You're like, oh, there's no mystery about what he's talking about here, and it's about how the lover seeks the beloved in the dark.
And God uses that language, that marriage language, between himself and his people, and between himself and us, all the time in the Bible. And
Your builder wants to marry you.
In New Testament. And so we have to be mindful of this. But we talk about God loving us, but when was the last time you looked at God as a lover? I would probably.
I think it makes a lot of people uncomfortable.
Yeah, and I would beg to say that I would, like, probably over 90% of us probably do not view God in that way.
Father, yes.
Yes, Father, yes, Savior, yes, Redeemer, yes. But do you look at God? Can you see God? Do you experience God as a lover?
And why I think that's really important is because that's how the Father looks at the Son.
Yeah.
Right. And so
Right.
that's why we say what we say. We're not just creating images and metaphors that have not been established already in what's going on in the Trinity.
Yeah. God's already revealed himself as a lover.
And all this language, this is very mystical. And you have to kind of open yourself up to that in order to be able to receive what St. John is offering in this lesson on the Dark Night. You have to be open to what a great mystical teacher he was.
Yeah.
And so let's
jump into
let's talk about it. So the dark night of the soul is experienced often in two stages. Such an experience in the spiritual life can begin with this initial stage, which is called the dark night of the senses. And this can present itself in ways like dryness in prayer. Maybe you're like, oh, my old routines aren't working anymore.
Been there, done that.
You're noticing a difference in that. Maybe there's a loss of comfort, emotional comfort, maybe spiritual sweetness or excitement that you used to have about certain things. Maybe you're like, there's something different. Something else is going on. Maybe you're starting to think something's wrong with me, which is strange because you're like, well, it worked yesterday. Why isn't it working today? This has worked for 10 years and it's not working now. Or it feels, but here's the thing. It feels like it's not working.
Right.
Doesn't mean it's not working.
There's something going on.
You all of a sudden are detached from old comforts and consolations that you used to have. And that's what it's a very sensory experience. And here's the thing. We already do this intentionally in the Christian life because we're called to live lives of sacrifice. We're called to look for ways that we can make sacrifices for other people, make sacrifices for love of another. And we have this discipline every year in a Lenten sense. We give up things that are comfortable, things that are good. We're not saying any of these things are
There's a
bad, but we
detachment
give
that
up.
takes place.
Yeah. And
Deliberate.
so we give up things that often correspond to our senses so that an even greater love can take its place. Every Lent is a dark night of the senses type of a thing. And so what's the purpose of this in St. John's writing? The purpose of this is to wean us from our dependence on feelings, because we do that in our secular life. We do that, in our domestic and professional situations. We also do it in the spiritual life. But God is desiring to wean us off of that so that we can move towards a more mature and selfless love. He's trying to do things in our relationship to him.
And if we're being honest, that's really what we desire at the end of the day.
Well, I don't know. Do you think that people desire that their consolations are taken away? I think we like our desires.
What I meant was the last thing he said. We all desire a more mature,
totally.
a more selfless love.
Sorry, I didn't listen to you.
Yeah,
I didn't want
okay.
to.
That's okay. That's what I meant. We all desire that. We all long to be loved unconditionally. We want to be accepted. We want to have that mature love.
But are we willing to do the things that are necessary to get us there? And that's the thing. It's like, well, why do we love God? Do we love God? Because there are times where, like, I do love to read. You make it seem like I'm more well-read than I am. I read little bits and pieces of a lot of things. I'm not sitting there reading volume upon volume of things, but I get really excited about certain things in the spiritual life. And that in and of itself is a consolation.
Well,
because I'm getting feedback from God based on something that I'm experiencing. And it makes you think. And this is the thing about the dark night of the senses. Do I love God because I'm invigorated in that moment? Or do I love God because of who he is? So do I love God for the gifts that he's giving me? Or would I love him if those gifts were not there? Because that's what we're talking about when we're talking about spiritual sweetness and emotional comfort in the spiritual life. Do I love the fact that I get to go and teach about the beautiful things of salvation history and I get a sense of deep meaning and purpose and invigoration from that and renewal? Would I still want to do it if it wasn't there?
I mean, sometimes I find that I do those things more for myself than I am for others.
That's what God's removing from the equation in a dark night of the senses.
Yeah.
Because even in the spiritual life, we kind of cling to the comfort that God brings. And the comfort's good. It's beautiful.
Yeah. So to give people some context for that, like when I go out and maybe do a confirmation talk or a confirmation retreat, I always come back. I'm juiced. afterwards.
Same.
Because I feel so good. I feel invigorated. I feel alive.
I call people on the way home because I'm like, let's start chatting.
Yeah, the spirit really kind of, I knew the spirit worked through me. I was able to see some progress and some results with the people that I might have been ministering to in that moment. But what happens when I do that and there's nothing? Mm-hmm. I come back from that. I do the exact same thing. I come back and there's nothing. Like I wasn't fed, right? I did this. I gave, emptied the tank. That's what the dark night is.
That's that's that sensory. He's removing good emotional, good experiences so that we can cling to him more, because maybe we're really not clinging to him in those moments. Maybe we're clinging to what we know the result's going to be. I'm going to feel really good after I do this.
Yeah.
Well, is it worth
doing? Or we're
doing
doing it more for, like, I do this because I know it's going to make me feel good.
It feeds your ego.
Yeah.
They say the bigger the ego, and here, this is for you. They say the bigger the ego, the bigger the dark night.
Yep. I would agree with that. I've been there. I have been there. There's been times where that dark night was extensive, and I do get that. I do recognize that.
Barron talks about it like it's a closing of the eyes, and this is he's got great stuff on this. I would urge you to listen to it. But he says, even when we go to pray, what we do is we close. If we're in adoration, we close our eyes, and we do so because we want to kind of be able to focus on God in prayer. And if I'm looking around, well, I'm going to be distracted. So he likens the dark night of the senses to God closing our eyes, because think about all the things that we see in the world. The more we see, the more our senses are heightened of those things that we're seeing. But if we close our eyes, then our spiritual senses can be heightened to the things of God. And so the problem with the things that we see, the reason we have to close our eyes is because God's not like anything or anyone in the world. He's entirely other.
And so I close and distractions are removed.
Yeah, I close my even the images in church that are depicting God and it all falls short of who God really is. Now, I'm not saying that Jesus falls short, but there are things in the church, even a candle is meant to transmit something about God. Incense transmits something about God. There comes a time in the spiritual life where I need to close my eyes and allow
God to transmit himself.
Yeah. So because there's nothing that we can liken him to in the world, we are encouraged, or sometimes God will intentionally darken our senses so that we can enter into a completely different spiritual space and see things as God sees them, including himself. I think the problem with that is that closing our eyes makes us really uncomfortable. I'll do this with my students sometimes. If I just want them to think about something, I'll be like, everybody close your eyes right now. And maybe a third of them do it. They're very suspect of like, why? I don't want to close. Then I can't see what's coming at me. I remember one time Sean wanted to take me to a restaurant and I didn't know where we were going. And he was like, close your eyes. I was like, in the car? Like, but then I can't critique your driving. Why would I do that? Like, that's not, I want to know where I'm going. So even just the idea that I wouldn't be able to see what's in front of me makes us really uncomfortable. If we can't rely on the comfort of knowing what's in front of us, then God can't really refine us in the way that he desires to.
And we do the same thing with silence. And we need to be like...
Well, it's a silence of the eyes.
It's a silence, yeah.
I want to read this bit from these Carmelite sisters here.
I was going to say, with all the little things that you read here and there, and rather than reading books, I would have thought that you would have been better at trivia.
I won't dignify that with a response.
Just saying.
Okay, so this comes from these Carmelite sisters of Los Angeles. They have a great website, and they have this little piece on the dark night, and of the senses in particular. And they say, why is this so necessary? Why would anybody have to go through any of this? And it says, humans by nature can't comprehend the grandeur, the spectacular beauty, and the depth of relationship with God to which all of us are called. We are short-sighted. We tend to become myopic, seeing things that are only immediately good. We undersell ourselves. We settle for less. We settle for the immediate. Consequently, we must be purified from any spiritual gluttony. This means that we could become, in time, inordinately attached to sense consolations and forget that sense consolation is not the end, only the means. The soul must be cleansed of spiritual sloth. It refers to a laziness or a mediocrity concerning holy things. This is particularly a temptation to those who live and work closest to holy things. The slothful response is, it's too hard. I sometimes think, well, why would I need to go through this?
Yeah.
This is why you would need to go through it. This is why God would say, this is good for you. And frankly, this is where I got the bigger the ego, the bigger the dark night.
Right, and it makes sense. But I latched on to what you said about we look for the immediate good. We latch on for the immediate good. We look for the immediate good. I think that's a reality that I think many of us experience. But sometimes the good isn't immediately available.
Right.
Sometimes
Or it's
the
not
good,
it's not the good that God is ultimately offering us.
Well,
we settle for lesser goods, maybe.
I think sometimes too, the good might not be for your eyes. It might be for the benefit of somebody else. Like I think about somebody who's enduring some type of a suffering or some type of a trial or tribulation, and they're looking for a way out. They're looking for an answer. They're looking for an immediate good from all of this. But that good isn't for them. God's going to use the good for somebody else who is going to see that person going through that and how they're handling it is going to gain some great inspiration from that. And maybe that's going to help that person down the line when they're afflicted with this dark period in their life. They're going to look to you as that model to kind of see how you handled it, that you were real in your struggle.
Yeah.
That you were like a Job crying out to God and complaining and asking for vindication.
Job kept coming to mind this whole time. Yeah.
So I think that there's always this opportunity for us that might not always be readily available for us. But we have, and that's where our relationship with God has to be, it's such a paramount importance, because if I trust God, if I truly trust God and I truly claim to know God, then I know that He's got this. He's going to see me through this. He's going to accompany me. It's kind of like the footprints in the sand poem. It's like He's carrying me at those times when I don't even realize I'm being carried. There's a wonderful outcome to all this, but there has to be a change in our perception to be able to see it. And sometimes we do need to close our eyes in order to be able to see it.
So years ago, I was listening to a video by Father Mike Schmitz, and I remember where I was. I was in a Planet Fitness, and I'm on the treadmill.
I'm sorry.
And I was in okay, don't be rude, okay? I was in a Planet Fitness.
I'm sorry, did I hear that correctly? You were at Planet Fitness?
I was at a Planet Fitness.
Okay.
And this gives you a little bit of insight into just
How
who I
many
am
years
as a
ago? It must
person.
have been a long time.
I'm not.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm just joking. I couldn't let that go. I'm sorry.
Oh my goodness.
We have to bring a little levity to this. It's a heavy
Yeah,
topic.
let's attack Christine's appearance. Clearly, she wouldn't be sensitive about that whatsoever. All right. I tolerate whatever you bring in day after day as it's continually evolving and changing, but okay. Years ago, I was in a Planet Fitness. This gives you a little bit of insight into what gym time for me is like. I was on the treadmill and I was listening to a video by Father Mike about the dark night of the soul. When everybody else is listening to like house trap music or whatever it is that they're listening to, it's like, what does Christine have going on those earbuds? She's got a video on the dark night of the soul, and I'm loving every bit of it. And I love the image that he gave, two images in particular, about what the dark night of the senses and what the dark night of the soul may feel like. And so I've shared this with so many people over the years. And he says that the dark night of the senses is like being in a boat and the tide goes out from under the boat and it leaves you kind of stuck in the mud or the sand. The thing about this stage is, though, that you see the water out on the horizon. You can still see the water. But the water used to feel like it was under you and that your boat was well supported. You were moving this way and that way. He said that is like what God's grace used to feel like, right? You were being kept afloat and your boat's moving back and forth. The thing about this, though, is that you're in the mud, you see the water. And that's really important because the distinction between the dark night of the senses and the dark night of the soul is pretty dramatic.
Yeah.
So you're in the boat, you're stuck, but you see the water and you're like, I just need to get to it. I just need to get to it.
Yeah.
So now we need to move to what the second stage is, which is the dark night of the spirit.
Yeah, so this is the flip side of the coin, right? So what is this stage? Using the same analogy of being in the boat, you're in the mud and you no longer see the water and it feels like there's no hope, right? So during this stage, the dark night of the spirit, what can well up within you is this profound sense of abandonment or distance from God, a profound interior silence, like you can't hear God's voice. Prayer and everything doesn't seem fruitful because it just seems very, very one-sided. There's a deep longing for God, like you want God's presence again. It's kind of, you feel as if it's been being withdrawn from you or being withheld. And there's a real strong temptation to fall into despair when you get into this type of a dark night of the spirit.
So why would God do this to anybody?
Well, the purpose of the experience really is, again, to purify us on the deepest level. And it really prepares the soul for transformative and profound union with God, which is really the highest state of mystical intimacy with God that we can hope for. Mm-hmm. God is doing something in these times of spiritual desolation, because what he's doing is he's refining our hearts, right? I think sometimes we can take a relationship for any relationship with somebody who's significant in our life for granted, right? And maybe it's the absence that makes the heart grow fonder, so to speak. Mm-hmm. When that relationship is distant or apart from us, we realize just how much we need that person, how much we rely on that person, how deep our love is for that person. And so I think that God is really using these opportunities. I know God is using these opportunities to really refine our heart, to help us to reconnect with him. And we have to choose him in these times more than ever. I think sometimes what happens is we just feel so lonely and isolated that we end up turning away from God, and it's counterproductive rather than turning towards God.
And so, revisit that image too of the boat. Think about those of you who are listening, those who are present here recording, think about what it is that you feel like, where's the water in relation to you in the boat? Are you in a dark night of the senses? Maybe you're not in any of this, but if you are, if this is pertaining to you, do you see the water on the horizon and you're like, ooh, if I could just get to it? Or has the water entirely gone out?
Yeah. Because
if the water has entirely gone out, we would say you're in a dark night of the spirit stage of your relationship.
I would also, again, this is a perception thing. Like if you're in that kayak and you are now beached, right? You're sitting there because the tide has gone out. You can see the water in the distance, but there's still water underneath you. The ground is still moist, so it's not like God has completely withdrawn.
The problem is that we feel this
way, yeah.
It doesn't mean it's true, because God never abandons us.
Yeah, and I think that's what I'm trying to drive at, because sometimes we can think like God has left me, and he never leaves us, right? He never leaves us. But we do have to push through it like never before.
Push is some of the best spiritual advice I ever heard. It stands for pray until something happens. It reminds me of that boat metaphor of Father Mike. If your boat is stuck in the mud and you can't even see the water, you push that boat out until you hit the water, because you know it's got to be out there somewhere. That's the thing. Like, you see it there and you're like, well, it's got to. So, what am I going to do? I can't just stay here, And so if I keep pushing, I know intellectually, rationally, I know I'll get to it eventually. But you have to keep pushing. I just love that. Pray until something happens. Push through.
Push through it. Yeah. And it's saying really that, God, I can't see you. I can't feel you. I'm beginning to question your existence. I'm beginning to doubt whether you love me. But I'm going to push this boat. I'm going to push through this desolation, this spiritual desolation that I'm going through, until I reach the living water once again. It's like the woman at the well.
Yeah, it's exactly what it is.
Yeah, it's like the woman at the well. She's coming at another time of the day, but she's seeking. Mm-hmm. She's seeking that life-giving water.
And the footprints thing that you mentioned, that's that. I'm trying to remember that poem. And the thing is that they only saw one.
Well, when they looked back at the darkest moments in their life, they only saw one set of footprints.
And it's because God's holding them.
And, right. And they question, like, well, why? Where were you in these moments? And Jesus says, my child, it was I who carried you, at these moments.
And that's the thing. It's God holding us. We think we're pushing the boat. Time. And it's like, I feel like I'm pushing it alone. And God's like, no. I've been here the whole time. Yeah. That's the thing. So when we say that things feel like spiritual abandonment, and when St. John meditates on these things, we have never been abandoned.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, God's doing this in your life. He's making you feel a certain way, or he's causing circumstances to arise that would allow you to feel an element of desolation. Number one, because you need it. He's doing things in the spiritual life that are necessary because of who you are, what you might be prone to, what he's calling you to. His ways, his methods are
God is
of
doing
heaven.
this. God is doing this for your good, but it's going to be one of these situations where you're not going to be able to see the immediate good from it.
Yeah.
Right? You have to again push through this to get you, because God's leading you somewhere else. Like you're over here, you're real comfortable in the canoe, but God has kind of withdrawn a little bit, because what does he do? He wants you to go deeper. Right? So now he's inviting you to something deeper. We got to pick up the boat. God will help you carry the boat. Right? It's kind of like, again, my favorite parable, go back to the prodigal son. How many times does this parable come up in our conversation? The son makes the journey home.
I've made a drinking game out of it.
I'm sure you did. Right? It could compete with Chris Stefanik. You have the son's making his way back home, but it's the father who runs out and brings him home the rest of the way. So if I'm going through this and I'm trying to push my way through it and I'm picking up that boat, I see the water over there, and it might be a struggle. I might be struggling to get the boat from here to there to where it needs to go. But God's going to help me. God's going to help me through that struggle, because this is where he wants me to be. Right? And he's doing this. And sometimes it is hard. So I think sometimes it is hard because that difficulty, that challenge that I might go through is going to lead to that transformation. It's going to lead to that growth. I need this. I need this. And it's not depression. I think that's one of the things that we have to understand. Like this is not about being depressed. It's not about loneliness. St. John explicitly states that the spiritual directors must be very careful not to confuse the dark night with melancholy or a mental illness of some sort. There may be suffering involved, but it has certain characteristics that can help us to distinguish the two. So when we talk about the dark night, he has a spiritual origin. It's a dark night. When you're going through a dark night, it has a spiritual origin. This is a movement from God, right? This is a movement from God. It leaves the soul with a quiet desire for God, even amid the dryness. When we're experiencing this dryness, when we find ourselves beached in that canoe or that kayak, right? We're longing for something more. We realize now, where is God? And now we begin to seek him. We want reunification with God. It doesn't eliminate our faith, but it purifies it, right? And so usually when we're experiencing this dark night, it usually comes with peace at a much deeper level, even when the emotions are dry. And so there's some very distinct characteristics that differentiate when we're going through the dark night compared to when we're dealing with melancholy, depression, any type of mental illness. Two very, very separate experiences.
Right. And they would have to be dealt with differently, too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, depression would have a psychological or a physiological origin as opposed to a divine origin.
Yeah, spiritual origin.
It's not limited to the spiritual life. And this is where they say, this is the way you can tell probably the most, is this something, are you experiencing dryness, suffering, maybe sadness? Is this something that is just pertaining to your faith life, or is this something that's kind of all encompassing, right? Things are not right at work. Things are not right at home. I don't have the right relationship with myself. My relationships are struggling. My voice is struggling. Sorry.
It also brings feelings of worthlessness, self-loathing. Sometimes when we have that depression, we're dealing with depression. We can experience low motivation, disrupted sleep, physical symptoms sometimes, and so there's no purification kind of going on when we're dealing with all of this stuff in a depressive state. And a lot of times when we're dealing with depression, what does it need? It needs psychological, medical, sometimes pastoral support.
And the worst thing we could do is just tell somebody who's suffering severe mental illness or any kind of element of depression, saying, "Oh, it's just your dark night." You're not doing them you're doing them a disservice. You're not helping them.
Right.
And so yeah, I mean, as spiritual priests in particular, I will say, need to be very aware of this, because as people come to maybe seek their counsel about what it is that they're going through, they need to figure out what it is that they're dealing with and treat it appropriately.
Right, because spiritual direction might not necessarily be what this person needs if they're dealing with depression. But if they're going through a dark night of the soul, then spiritual direction can be very, very helpful. So how is this good?
I think we can look at this dark night of the soul experience very similarly to how we look at the tree of the knowledge of good and evil in the Garden of Eden and the story of Genesis. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil in the garden is a manifestation of God's love for us. We don't always see it that way, but it's God giving us the option not to love him. And he does that out of great love for us. I mean, the fact that he gifts us free will is an absolute game changer. If he doesn't give that to us, he does not really love us.
Yeah.
This dark night of the soul is another manifestation of God's love for us. It's good for the human person. It's good for our souls. It's a loving act on the part of God, because in the dark night, he's calling out to our souls to draw the soul closer to union with him, which ultimately is going to be perfected in heaven.
Right. Purified and made holy.
But he's doing something that needs to happen in our lives in the same way that we needed to receive free will. There are some people who need to undergo this experience so they can be as close to God as they need to be, because maybe there's a particular consolation, maybe there's something heart-centered that is preventing them from drawing closer and closer and closer to God. And God does not want us to have any obstacle between us and him. There's a quote from the poem, The Dark Night of the Soul, where it speaks to this is God's loving power in our lives. And it says this, it says, "Without other light or guide, save that which in my heart was burning." So it's equating the dark night of the soul to this flame that is only alive because of love. And that is what's guiding. I mean, it's like every other light has gone out, and all that remains is the love that God has for me and the love that I have for him.
This desire.
That is the only thing that lights my way.
Right. This burning desire that we have for God, that's innate.
Yeah. And,
right?
and I have my eyes open in prayer. I'm seeing all the other lights that are in the world, distracted by so many things. But if I close my eyes, and maybe even to a certain degree, if I close other parts of myself, which is what the dark night of the spirit might bring about, well, then I can see that fire burning because I'm not distracted by anything else. And that's the love that exists between the lover and the beloved. And that's why I say this language is so strong if you read the poem. It's about love being the only thing that remains, and that love being held fast to in the darkness, and that leads to union with God. He allows his presence to be hidden so that the flame of love is the only light that remains. That's work worth doing. That's also work worth receiving.
Sometimes when everything else is dark in my life, sometimes it's just the love that I receive from my wife or my kids that makes things bearable. Like I can weather through this, even though everything else in my life might be going to crap. There's something else there that keeps me anchored. And I think that's where the hope kind of comes in. When we talk about that episode of hope, and it being the anchor keeps us steady in the storm. It gives us something to hold on to. And love can do that.
I love the final stanza of the poem. It says, "I continued, in oblivion lost, my head was resting on my love, lost to all things and to myself, and amid the lilies forgotten, threw all my cares away." Now, if poetry is not your thing, I completely understand. But it's this image of just the two essentially holding each other. They have found each other. They're in a greater experience of love, marriage, union, profound transformation. And the only way that they were able to, or the only way that we experience that, because God, there's no problem on the part of God, is because he and his love is the light that was ever burning. Followed that light. When everything else went out, we continued to follow the light.
That's beautiful imagery.
Let's move on to the saints.
Well, there's several saints that speak on this darkness that we can experience in our lives. St. John of the Cross, St. Teresa of Avila, Therese of Lisieux, even Fulton Sheen has something to say on it.
And those first three, they're all Carmelites. I mean, so this is this dark night of the soul stuff is so Carmelite spirituality.
Yeah, and so St. John of the Cross says, if a man wishes to be sure of the road he treads on, he must close his eyes and walk in the dark. And so it goes back to this trust issue, right? We have to trust God beyond feelings, beyond understanding. It's that idea of surrender, I think, plays into that, to be able to let go and let God. Like you gave that quote from the dark night, I throw my cares away.
Yeah. I'm
like, all right, God, here I am. I'm going to give you everything. I know that you've got this. Lead me where you want to lead me.
Yeah. My head was resting on my love. Threw all my cares away. I mean, oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's great imagery.
Teresa of Avila was no stranger to long periods of spiritual dryness, spiritual darkness. She said, "Patience obtains all things. Whoever has God lacks nothing. God alone suffices." because that's what happens when all the other lights go out. In the darkness, God alone suffices.
St. Therese of Lisieux even entered a very severe spiritual darkness near the end of her life, and, where she was feeling very unable to believe in heaven at times. And during that time, she said, I chose always the will of God. Even if I feel nothing, I still believe. She wasn't going to be swayed by this darkness that she was experiencing. She knew that this separation that she was feeling from God wasn't a true separation. She believed that God was still present there with her, even though she couldn't see him or experience him. And then Fulton Sheen talks about how, he says, the dark night is not God's absence, but his presence, too great for our small hearts to bear. Yeah,
that's why the whole thing is so mystifying, because it doesn't sound like these things should, any of these things should go together.
Right, yeah.
But when we see what the result is, that's when we see the wisdom of God.
And again,
this is what you were trying to do the whole time.
And this is where the hope piece comes in.
Yeah. So the dark night is ultimately a journey towards union with God. It's not meant to draw us away from him, even though that's the temptation. It's preparation for heaven. It's necessary preparation for heaven. St. John says that the dark night ends in a dawn brighter than any soul has ever known. He said, in the dark night of the soul, bright flows the river of God. But what feels like abandonment is often God drawing us closer than ever before. So what do we have to do? We have to keep pushing. A dark night time is not the time to retreat. It's a sign to draw near, keep pushing, keep pushing. So if you're experiencing dryness or confusion, or if there's no water to be found on that horizon line, know this, that you're not alone.
No, you're not.
That many of the saints have walked this dark road. It didn't mean that they were not holy. It didn't mean that they didn't love God enough.
Or that God didn't love them.
They emerged victoriously transformed. And that's what God has in store for you too. The dark night is not a sign that God is leaving you. It's a sign that he's preparing you. And what is he preparing you for? He's preparing you for heaven. Like Father Mike says this, he said, there's a similarity between a dark night of the soul experience and what somebody might experience in purgatory. We can be purified here, or we can be purified in purgatory. So it's almost a purgative stage that we can experience in this life or the next.
And let's be honest. I mean, I know just from my own personal experience that there's things that I've placed in my life. There's obstacles in my life that are preventing me from experiencing the love of God as he wants and desires to give me. Sometimes it just might be what I'm doing with my time, what I'm choosing to do with my time. Sometimes it might be a struggle with a particular vice or a particular sin. Sometimes it could just be a person that somebody has dropped in my life that's just causing me all sorts of angst and frustration, present company excluded. But we're but we go through these things. There's an opportunity for us to be transformed when we push through it and when we lean in it. So be patient, stay faithful, and let the hidden work of God unfold, right? Because where you are going to end up at the end of this is going to be far better from where you started. Mm-hmm. Guaranteed. But it may take some time. This isn't something that we rush through. This is God's time. Allow him to lead you. I mean, I've gone through these periods myself, sometimes for over a year.
A true dark night. Do you think you've had a true dark night?
Oh yeah, I've experienced it, and it's taken like maybe the better part of a year because of my own doing, my own resistance, my own frustration, and because maybe I wasn't trying to push through it. I was trying to avoid it or trying to find an alternate way of dealing with it. But when you lean into it, when you give into it, and allow God to take you where he wants to go, I'm like, why did I resist?
Yeah.
I was such an idiot. Why did I resist? I'm in such a better place now than I was before. Why did I fight this? Why did I resist? Why did I not see it? Because I didn't close my eyes and give God my hand, like, Sean driving you to the restaurant.
Yep.
Just shut your eyes and let me take you where you need to go. So again, it goes back to, I love that quote that last thing where he says, I throw all my cares away. I lean in, put my head, what does he say? Like, my head is resting on my love. I'm resting my head on and that's an image that resonates with me because I do that a lot with prayer. I always just kind of think of myself sitting on the edge of a dock, sitting under a tree, sitting somewhere with Jesus, and my head's just resting on him. So I can get into that. And just being with Christ Jesus. It's not so much doing, it's the being part. It's one thing to hear a podcast that might go like maybe 45, 50 minutes or so, but it's another thing for you to actually read what St. John wrote in his treatise. The poem is not long. You can look it up and you can read it in less than, 2 minutes? If that, it's like 30 seconds.
Yeah.
So The Dark Night by St. John of the Cross, and then think about getting the book, The Ascent of Mount Carmel, because what he's doing there, he's really unpacking.
It has a lot of spiritual wisdom.
But it might give you also just the hope and the perspective that you need if you're going through this dark period yourself. And you're like, oh my gosh, there's going to be an end to all this at some point. And it might just help you to better navigate and give you the strength and the wisdom that you need to pick up the boat. Or maybe just to see that the water is right there on the horizon. It's not as far away as you think. Yeah, so do it.
Yeah.
Just do it.
Just do it.
Yeah.
I don't know. We can't possibly end like that. I can't be. And then they had an episode in The Dark Night of the Soul, and then they sound like mob bosses at the end. No,
just do it.
So, if you like this this may have seemed like a lot. This is an overly simplified version of The Dark Night of the Soul. We didn't even talk about passive Dark Night and an active Dark Night. There's a whole lot more that we could talk about.
Read the book.
Don't even do that. Maybe not just yet. My point is that I think it's important to know that not everybody is going to experience this too. This is not something that you have to undergo this in the spiritual life to be a saint. No, some saints experience something like this. Some didn't. Everybody has their own unique experience. Yeah. But to just know that whatever's happening in your life, in your relationship with God, God's doing it because of who you are, and you're not the person who's next to you. And it's preparation for heaven.
That's it.
And that's God's wisdom, and that's good enough for me to keep pushing through.
Yeah. Amen.
Right. We will see you next week.
All right. God bless.